So, right, so muscadinia, the popular cultivar, like I said, there's probably 8 to 10 that are like regionally economically important in the Southeast. Probably the most famous one would be Scuppernong. This is kind of what my dad drank growing up. So yeah, there's other ones called like Carlos, Supreme, Noble. You'll see these in the Southeast. They're very interesting. They're very distinct. You can smell the fruit even off the vine. You can be just downwind by about 50 feet, and you can smell it when they're ripe. They smell kind of like orange blossoms, roses, kind of melony, rubber cementy. Sometimes if it's really powerful and too ripe, it can be kind of rubber cementy. So had we been in person, this is the wine I would have served y'all. This is Duplin, which is a winery based in North Carolina. They make a lot of this. Duplin does about 450,000 cases a year of sales. It's ridiculous how much they sell. So it is regionally important, but economically for like the United States, the muscadine line is not a major contributor to the overall GDP contribution of the wine industry. But still, like this is a giant winery, which is like, so this one winery is producing about Long Island's total annual production, which is just to put that in perspective if you're familiar with Long Island as a wine region. So they're producing, over 1 million gallons a year of this. It's actually, I reckon it's a pretty good wine. And what I would have done in person, and we can't do it in person this year, is I would have provided you with a toast. North Carolina does have a state toast in which muscadine does feature. So here's the state toast of North Carolina. So here's to the land of the longleaf pine, the summer land where the sun doth shine, where the weak grow strong and the strong grow great. Here's to down home, the old North State. Here's to the land of the cotton bloom white, where the Scuppernong perfumes the breeze at night, where the soft southern moss and jasmine mate, beneath the murmuring pines of the old North State. Here's to the land where the galax grows, where the rhododendron's rosette glows, where soars Mount Mitchell's summit great, in the land of the sky, in the old North State. Here's to the land where the maidens are fair, where friends are true and cold hearts rare, the near land, the dear land, whatever fate, the blessed land, the best land, the old North State. Pretty cool, huh? It's neat that they have a state toast and that it mentions a grape variety. Muscadino rotundifolia, it's mostly used for rootstock crosses because it's tolerant of phylloxera, which we'll talk about, but phylloxera is a root louse that can kill Vitis vinifera, and Ziphinema index, which is a nematode, and which vectors this virus called fan leaf, which is the major issue with Ziphinema index, is that it can give you fan leaf. So oftentimes we use this in rootstocks where we want to confer some sort of resistance or tolerance of Ziphinema index in the virus, as well as phylloxera, which all rootstocks should be tolerant of phylloxera. The fruit is resistant to diseases, and that is why it's so good in the southeast of the United States, right? There's a lot of rainfall down there, and it's a lot warmer, very humid. So the disease pressure is very high. So these Muscadinia rotundifolia has to be tolerant of or resistant to these diseases, right? So here's like a rootstock, right? So here, this was bred by UC Davis, by Andy Walker and his team. I believe this was, put out, I think that 05 is actually the year that it was released, 2005. So yeah, GRN1, which is Vitis rupestris by Muscadinia rotundifolia. And the reason for these rootstocks is dealing with the nematodes and the fan leaf. So phylloxera, like we just talked about, what is it? It's this little root louse here. There it is. Looks pretty gross. They're very, very small. Like you have to use a hand lens to see them. And even with a hand lens at 10 times magnification, It's very hard to see them. They feed on the roots. They live in the soil. They feed on the roots. And when they open wounds on the roots of Vitis vinifera, the wounds will get infected by fungi in the soil. And then, so the fungi will then travel up the vascular tissue, and then it'll just kind of clog up the vascular tissue, essentially girdling the roots. The roots die off, and then the vines the growth looks stunted, and they also start to look like water stressed because they're not able to pull up water now through their clogged up roots. And then you'll dump water on the vineyard, and you're trying to ameliorate the water stress. The water stress doesn't go away, then the vines just die. So Vitis vinifera is very susceptible to phylloxera. There is a leaf galling form of it that's here in the eastern United States. We don't have this issue on the West Coast. I mean, there are instances where we've had this in nurseries on the West Coast, but we don't really see this kind of issue out west. This isn't actually even really an issue on the East Coast. You don't have to spray for this, but it looks pretty gnarly when it happens. This phylloxera is native to North America. So it's one of our many great contributions to the world of wine. Phylloxera, powdery mildew, that's all us. You're welcome, world. Yeah, it went after, we'll talk about this more in the future, but it nearly collapsed the French wine industry in the 1850s, between the 1850s and 1860s. It came over with some planting material that was from the United States. People wanted to plant funny little North American varieties in their gardens in France. They're just kind of like curiosities. But they reckon it was actually this one doctor, I believe in Bordeaux, maybe the Languedoc, and the fellow put it in his garden, and it had phylloxera on the roots, and then it spread from there, and it destroyed, I believe, something like 60 to 70% of the acreage in France. And then they replanted using rootstocks that are resistant to, are tolerant of phylloxera, right? So it makes sense that the Vitis species that are native to the United States are going to be tolerant to phylloxera because they co-evolved together, right? So now what we do for like most of our grapevines globally is we have a rootstock, and then we graft on the scion, right? So we graft the top on. So you have a rootstock with something that's kind of a North American species or a North American cross, and then the top of it will be like Vitis vinifera, your Pinot Noir, your Cabernet Sauvignon, and so forth. Okay, so your first one. So this one requires a little bit of critical thought. So AXR1, which is a rootstock, that is a cross between Vitis rupestris, which is a North American species, and Vitis vinifera, right? This failed in the 80s and early 90s for what reason? It failed to phylloxera because Vitis vinifera is susceptible. It failed to fanleaf, which is vectored by nematodes. It failed to high active lime and Napa Valley soils. No one would ever put a rootstock out with Vitis vinifera as a parent. This never happened. Yeah, so it failed to phylloxera because Vitis vinifera was a parent and Vitis vinifera is susceptible, right? So all these North American species like Vitis rupestris, Riparia, all these, Berlandieri, Cinerea, all these things are tolerant of phylloxera because they co-evolved with phylloxera, right? So this was actually a massive problem in Napa. We'll talk about it further in this course, but this ended up resulting in, again, roughly like the replanting of about 70% of Napa. So they're actually like most of Napa, like it's really pretty rare to find a vineyard in Napa that the vines are actually older than, 40 years old or so, 40 years. The roots, what is a rootstock? A rootstock is, so like I was saying, so you graft. So you have a rootstock, like with a grapevine, you'll have generally, unless it's own rooted, which is just Vitis vinifera stuck in the ground, or whatever species just stuck in the ground. If it's a grafted vine, which is mostly what we grow globally, you'll have a rootstock, and then you'll graft, rootstock will be a different species, and then you'll graft on the top, the scion, which is the top of the plant. So the scion will be like Pinot Noir, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, And then the rootstock will be something like a cross between Vitis riparia, Vitis rupestris, or whatever, right? And it's so that you can deal with issues like phylloxera and or nematodes and fan leaf and whatever else.